welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name's Martin, and I'm trying to make this channel something where I can share my experiences now that I've retired. Now, in the last vlog, I visited Bletchley Park, and I said that I wasn't going to go into any great detail about Bletchley Park because it's quite complex, and the best way for you to find out is actually to go. And that's still very true. But since I got back, I've been pondering, shall we say, on some of the little stories, and it was the little stories that really made the greatest impact on me. Some of the little stories that surround not just Bletchley Park, but all the surrounding outlying stations and listening posts. And one of those stories is how the code breakers at Bletchley acquired the code books and ciphers for the 4-rotor Enigma machine. So before we go any further, what is the difference between a code and a cipher? Now, a coded message is a series of words, phrases or numbers that are converted into other words, phrases or numbers. The original code might read, "You attack at dawn," but the message that's received is completely different and may say, "Buy some milk." The person receiving that message will need a code book to decode the message. In the case of a cipher, it changes the individual letters or small groups of letters into other letters and numbers. In this example, the words "You attack at dawn" can be transformed into any combination of letters, numbers or spaces, such as is written on the screen. To decipher the message, the receiver will need to know how each letter has been transformed, the main task facing the code breakers at Bletchley Park. I was aware that this material was acquired from a disabled German U-boat somewhere in the Mediterranean, but I didn't know anything about the circumstances of the people that actually did it, and that's what I want to do this video about. Now, up to early 1942, the Allies had had a great deal of success in deciphering messages or decoding messages that were sent via the Enigma machines. At that point, Enigma had 3 rotors. Then in February 1942, the Germans added an extra rotor to their machines, and they now had 4 rotors. That was a bit of a game changer for Bletchley Park. They could no longer accurately decipher and decode messages sent between the field commanders within the German forces. And then, in the early hours of the 30th of October 1942, a stroke of good fortune befell the Allies. Patrolling Short Sunderland flying boat from 201 Squadron was patrolling the Eastern Mediterranean and spotted a shadow of a submarine around about 70 miles north of the Nile Delta. It immediately alerted the authorities, and a destroyer, HMS Hero, was alerted by radio and steamed to intercept. At the same time, destroyers HMS Petard, Pakenham, Dulverton and Herworth sailed from Port Said in Egypt. At around about 12:30, a Wellesley patrol aircraft from 47 Squadron spotted a periscope of a submerged U-boat, turned out to be U-559, and attacked with depth charges. The destroyer group hunted for the U-boat for 16 hours, constantly depth charging, and after dark, U-boat 559, with a cracked pressure hull and unable to maintain level trim, 4 of her crew dead through explosions and flooding, was forced to surface. She was close to HMS Petard, which immediately opened fire. The German crew hurriedly scrambled overboard without destroying the code books or Enigma machine, and crucially failing to open the seawater vents that would scuttle the U-boat. As the crew were abandoning their stricken U-boat, the powers that be, the authorities on HMS Petard, saw the potential that there could be some important information for the war effort still on board the submarine. So they asked for volunteers to swim across to the stricken submarine to look for valuable information. Stepped forward Lieutenant Francis Anthony Fasson, able seaman Colin Grazier, and a NAFI assistant by the name of Tommy Brown. Lieutenant Francis Anthony Blair Fasson was born on the 17th of July 1913. He made a career in the Royal Navy after joining in September 1930, where he served on the battleship Rodney as a midshipman until June 1933. He was promoted to acting sub-lieutenant in September of the same year. In September 1935, Fasson was attached to the Royal Air Force with the temporary rank of flying officer to train as a pilot at RAF Lucas. He returned to the Navy on the 16th of June 1936 and joined the minesweeping sloop HMS Salamander. He was then promoted to full lieutenant in September of the same year. He then served on a variety of ships until early 1941, when he was posted to HMS Nile, the naval headquarters at Alexandria in Egypt. He finally returned to sea duty on March 1942 as First Lieutenant on the destroyer Petard. Able seaman Colin Grazier was born on the 7th of May 1920 in Tamworth, Staffordshire. He was educated locally and joined the Royal Navy at the outbreak of the Second World War. After his training, he was posted to HMS Petard. Thomas William Brown was born in 1926. In 1941, at the age of 15, Brown joined the NAFI and was assigned as a catering assistant on board HMS Petard. Unlike other services, the NAFI only accepted men from the age of 17 onwards, so Brown had lied about his age in order to join. Now, for those that aren't aware, NAFI stands for Navy, Army and Air Force Institutes. It's an organisation that was established in December 1920 by the British government to run recreational establishments for the British Armed Forces, basically to provide comfort for service personnel. These three men stripped off and plunged into the ice-cold water and swam across to the submarine, which was now quite low in the water. Once on board the submarine, the two Navy men made their way to the captain's cabin, where Lieutenant Fasson found a set of keys. They unlocked drawers and found two code books, the short weather cipher and the short signals code book. Brown carried these documents up the iron ladder of the U-boat's conning tower to Petard's whalers, which was waiting on the surface. He climbed down a further two occasions to salvage documents, but at the end of his third one, he shouted down to his colleagues that the submarine was in danger of sinking and they should actually leave the submarine now. Unfortunately, Fasson and Grazier didn't make it to the surface. Brown himself was dragged under as the submarine sank, but managed to fight his way back to the surface, where he was picked up by the whaler, and then the whaler took him and the documents back to HMS Petard. Fasson and Grazier were never seen again. The information gathered from U-boat 559 reached Bletchley Park within a couple of weeks and proved invaluable right through to the end of the war in cracking the submarine U-boat codes. Lieutenant Fasson and able seaman Grazier were both awarded the George Cross for their bravery in the face of extreme danger. Tommy Brown was posthumously awarded the George Medal. It was discovered that he had enlisted too young, so he went back to North Shields, where he was born. Unfortunately, in 1945, he died in a fire while trying to save his sister. For security reasons, it was many decades before this story emerged. Tommy Brown never did know what he had achieved, never did understand the significance of the code books that he'd salvaged from the submarine. Now, as I was preparing this video, I came across something online by Captain Jerry Roberts in a presentation that he made to the University College London. Roberts was one of the great minds of Bletchley Park and was a senior code breaker. In that presentation, he paid tribute to the three men he held up as the three people who above all else were responsible for the positive intelligence outcomes at that time. One of these three was fairly well known, Alan Turing. The other two, Bill Tutt and Tommy Flowers, not so much. Now, as most of us will be aware, Alan Turing was one of the ones largely responsible for cracking Enigma. This severely hampered German U-boat activity. Once the Allies understood the Enigma messages, the U-boat Wolfpack, or Operation Success, dropped from nearly 100% down to only 25%. Without that, Britain would have rapidly run out of fuel and raw materials and may well have been forced into submission by starvation. The second of these three influential people was Bill Tutt. Now, Bill Tutt broke the Tunny codes, and Tunny was the name given to the messages sent on the Lorenz encryption machines. These messages were those sent by Hitler, amongst others, to his senior commanders and field marshals. After all the senior cryptographers at Bletchley Park had a go at trying to crack Tunny, the challenge was given to a 24-year-old mathematician called Bill Tutt. It took Tutt 3 months to discover how the messages were being coded. Following the war, General Eisenhower said that this breakthrough shortened the war by 2 to 3 years, bearing in mind that each year between 8 and 10 million people were dying during the Second World War. The third person mentioned in Jerry Roberts' tribute was a guy called Tommy Flowers. He was a GPO technician. GPO at the time was the forerunner of British Telecom, later to become BT. Flowers was given the task of speeding up the decryption of complex codes, particularly from Lorenz. When this was explained to him, what was required and what he needed to do, he was asked how long it would take to come up with an electrical solution. He said it would take about 12 to 18 months. Forget it, came the reply. The Germans will have won the war by then. He commenced anyway and completed the job within 10 months, working day and night, and indeed on some occasions spending his own money to buy components for his new machine. And what he came up with was a thing called Colossus, and Colossus was the first electronic code breaking system and was operational by February 1944. Colossus was the forerunner of modern day computing. By the end of the Second World War, there were nearly 9,000 people working at Bletchley Park, and they're probably all worthy of mention. But I would like to add one more name to Jerry Roberts' list, that of Gordon Welchman. Welchman was a mathematician working at Bletchley Park, and he worked very closely with Alan Turing in developing BOM. BOM was the machine that helped the Allies decrypt a lot of the Enigma messages that had been intercepted. Now, because of a thing called the Official Secrets Act, the story of these and the three that I mentioned earlier on in this video were held back, and it took several decades before the information started to filter out. But it's thanks to places like the museum at Bletchley Park that their stories are now being told.